We've all been sick, right? But have you ever stopped to think about what that really means? Well, today we're diving deep into the world of diseases. We're going to break down what they are, how they spread, and most importantly, how we can fight back. Let's get into it. So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the absolute basics. What even is a disease? Then we'll zoom out and look at the scale of sickness. From a local problem to a full-blown global crisis. After that, we'll get into the two main types of diseases, and then we'll meet the tiny troublemakers behind them. Finally, we'll wrap up with the good stuff, how we can actually protect ourselves. Okay, first things first. We throw the word disease around all the time, but what's the actual scientific definition? I mean, it's a pretty basic question when you think about it. You know that feeling when you're just off, when your body just isn't working right? Well, there's a proper term for that. And there it is. A disease is basically any time your body deviates from its normal, healthy state because something's not working properly, either structurally or functionally. It's a pretty broad definition, right? It can cover everything from a minor cold to something much more serious. But it all comes down to the same thing. Your body isn't running the way it's supposed to. So now we know what a disease is. But how it spreads is a whole other part of the story. The scale of an outbreak is absolutely critical to understand, which brings us to our next section. To really get a handle on this, scientists use four main terms. First, you have endemic. Think of this as a disease that's kind of always hanging around in a specific area, like yellow fever in certain parts of Africa. Then things can escalate to an epidemic. That's when you see a major outbreak that affects a whole lot of people in a larger region. Now, if that epidemic crosses borders and goes global, well, we all know what that's called, a pandemic. And finally, you have sporadic cases, which are just what they sound like, random, isolated cases that pop up here and there. And this table here really helps put that all into perspective. An endemic problem like goiter is consistently found in a specific geographical area. A disease like the plague can become an epidemic, sweeping through a whole population. But then you have something that can become a true global threat, a pandemic, like we all experience with COVID-19. It really shows you the different levels of threat we can face. Okay, we've talked scale. Now let's talk type. Turns out, all diseases basically fall into two big buckets. This is kind of the great divide in how we think about sickness. On one side, you have your non-communicable diseases. This is the stuff you can't catch from someone else, like diabetes, arthritis, or cancer. But on the other side, that's where you find the communicable or infectious diseases. These are the ones caused by germs, or as we'll call them, pathogens. And they're the ones that can jump from one person to another. And it's these pathogens we're going to investigate right now. All right, it's time to meet the culprits. Let's put some faces to the names and see exactly who's responsible for all these infectious diseases. The official scientific term is pathogen. And I love this, it actually comes from Greek and literally means disease producer. Pretty fitting, huh? These are the microscopic critters that make us sick, and there are a few main types we need to get to know. First in our lineup, and you've definitely heard of this one, bacteria. Now, these are single-celled organisms, and they are, well, they're everywhere. And a lot of them are totally harmless. Some are even really helpful to us. But the ones we're talking about, the pathogenic ones, they're the ones behind some big-name diseases like tuberculosis, cholera, and typhoid. Okay, next up in our rogues gallery, we've got viruses. And these guys, they play by a totally different set of rules. For starters, they are ridiculously small. And here's the real kicker, they can't reproduce on their own. They're like tiny biological pirates. They have to invade our cells and hijack the machinery inside just to make more copies of themselves. Viruses are the culprits behind AIDS, chickenpox, and, you guessed it, COVID-19. Now, this table here, this really spells out the difference. You can see bacteria are living cells that can reproduce all by themselves. Viruses, on the other hand, are much smaller, they don't have a real cell structure, and they absolutely require a host to multiply. And understanding this is so important because it's why antibiotics, which are designed to kill bacteria, do absolutely nothing against a virus. They're just fundamentally different things. But hold on, the pathogen party isn't over yet. It's not just bacteria and viruses. We also have to deal with protozoa. These are another type of single-celled organism, and they're responsible for some really devastating global diseases. We're talking about things like malaria, amoebic dysentery, and even something called sleeping sickness. And for our final troublemaker, we're sizing up a lot. Let's talk about parasitic worms. Yep, you heard me right. Worms, also known by their scientific name, helminths. These things can actually live inside a host's body. That's us, and cause disease by basically stealing nutrients and messing things up internally. Okay, wow, we've met the enemy. From bacteria to worms and everything in between. So now we get to the most important part of all. How do we fight back? This is where we turn all this knowledge into action. Fighting back is all about creating a multi-layered defense. Of course, vaccination is a huge one. It's like training our immune system for a fight before it even begins. But honestly, simple, everyday actions are just as critical. Good sanitation and hygiene, I'm talking about really washing your hands properly, can stop pathogens dead in their tracks. Making sure our food and water are clean, controlling disease carriers like flies and mosquitoes, getting rid of waste properly, it all adds up. And of course, just trying to avoid direct contact with someone who's sick is a basic but powerful way to stop the spread. Every single one of these is a piece of the puzzle. So there you have it. We've gone from defining disease all the way down to the microscopic villains that cause them. They say knowing the enemy is half the battle. So now that you know a bit more, what's one thing you might do differently to protect yourself and those around you? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.